You probably have heard about Ed Gein, but perhaps there are things that may surprise you about him, his case, or his victims. Things that you didn't know. When I was researching for the Ed Gein video I did, there were things I had no idea about, and today I'm going to go over 10 of them. As usual, the following content contains material intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion advised. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. So, number 1, Ed Gein was not actually a serial killer. The generally accepted definition of a serial killer is someone who murders 3 or more people with a significant period of time separating each killing. Ed was only convicted of 1 murder. He was considered mentally insane and unable to stand trial for most of his detainment at the hospital for the criminally insane. He was not tried for the murder of Bernice Worden, even though her naked, mutilated body was found in his house, for over 10 years. By the time 1968 rolled around, Ed was fat and happy, and the doctors found he was sane and fit to stand trial for Bernice's murder. The trial lasted 1 week. The evidence of prints, ballistics, and all the other horrible findings were insurmountable. He was found guilty of murder because of his actions after the murder, but found insane at the time of the crime and was sent back to a mental institution. Number 2, Ed was a possible suspect in other disappearances. This little fact was really disturbing to me when I was researching this case. The human remains found at the Gein home did not match the number of grave robbings and murders that Ed had confessed to, leading the police to question him about other disappearances. He was questioned about several young girls that were abducted in Wisconsin and 3 people in Plainfield. One man, James Walsh, that had gone missing was Ed's neighbor, and Ed would help the man's wife after the disappearance. Another pair of men went missing in Plainfield were Victor Travis and Ray Burgess, and after their disappearance, when the topic would come up with other locals, Ed stated that he knew where they were buried and could take them to where they were. And there was Eileen Keating. When given a lie detector test regarding her disappearance, the results were inconclusive. But ultimately, the investigators and the community wanted to be rid of the spectacle nationally and internationally that the crimes of Ed Gein brought to the small town. It seems that there was a concerted effort to drop the whole ordeal and let more in-depth investigations go, with reasons like lack of funds to investigate and prosecute. Local investigators also stated that they would not pursue the disappearances because they didn't have anyone missing. James, Victor, Ray, and Irene. Number 3. Although there were depictions of him digging up his mother's corpse and sleeping in the bed at night with her, that didn't happen. Ed did try to unbox his mother after her death, but he was not successful. Ed's mother, Augusta, had been buried with a concrete vault on top of her coffin because the soil in the area was so sandy. There were also tales of him shrinking her head, but that was not based on truth either. His mother remains undisturbed. I've got Bluetooth on. What's the problem? Number 4. Ed showed locals the shrunken heads and had told a couple people the whereabouts of some of the missing. Ed frequently had local children over to his house. He would teach them how to play the accordion and play games, and while they were there, they would eat soup out of strange bowls, which they later found out were the tops of human skulls. While they visited, Ed showed them shrunken heads that he had gotten from his cousin who had served in World War II and had gotten them in the South Sea. One young thrill-seeker actually slipped away into Ed's bedroom and saw the face masks Ed had made and trophied in his room. The children thought they were all fake, and if they did tell anyone, they were not believed and nothing was done. When the topic of the disappearance of Mary Hogan came up with locals, Ed told them that Mary wasn't missing. She was up at his house. I wonder if he said that she was hanging around. Number 5. Did you ever know Mary Hogan may have been a madam? Maria Josephine Covan Hogan, or Mary as she was called, was born in Austria in 1901 and had immigrated to the U.S. with her father and sister at the age of 13. She was a twice divorced, maybe thrice divorced, woman with a child she had out of wedlock and abandoned. She was a hearty woman that was rowdy, foul-mouthed, with a thick accent. It was rumored that she had been a big city madam in Chicago and had associated with the mob. It always warms my heart to see a woman confident and unapologetic about taking norms and standards and shoving them up society's ass. Number 6. Ed was suspected in killing his brother. First off, I had no idea Ed had any siblings, so to hear that it was likely that he killed his brother was one of those surprise, not surprised moments. As we've been told, Augusta was an overbearing, dominating, religious authoritarian. And by 1944, Henry, Ed's brother, had started to defy Augusta. He He began dating a divorced mother of two and even started to make plans to move in with her. This must have driven Augusta into a frenzy of anger and frustration. He also started to criticize Augusta to Ed, calling her a crazy shrew and suggesting that her relationship with Ed was too close and he was too dependent on her. These things were appalling to Ed, who considered Augusta his best friend. He idolized his mother, believed she was a disciple of God and good in every way. In May, Ed ran to authorities to get help when he couldn't find his brother after a brush fire they had set got out of control. When the authorities followed Ed, he led them right to Henry's body. Henry was lying face down on scorched earth, but he was untouched by the flames. They did see that he had a head wound. When authorities later asked Ed about not knowing where his brother was, but leading the investigators right to him, Ed said, "Funny how that works." Henry's death was ruled a heart attack while fighting the fire, and he hit his head while falling. There was no autopsy, even though some suspected foul play, but nothing was done. No investigation or charges were filed because they felt Ed wasn't capable of anything malicious. Number 7. Ed believed his neighbor, Mr. Smith, killed his mother. Augusta had already had a stroke that left her an invalid that Ed had no problem nursing her back to health. But it was on one unfortunate day that things took a turn for the worse. Ed and Augusta went to a neighbor's farm for supplies for their remaining livestock. At the Smith's farm, Mr. Smith was beating a puppy mercilessly. Smith's girlfriend came out of the house yelling at the cruelty, begging Smith to stop, but he would not relent and beat the poor puppy to death. But it was not the beating of the puppy that had upset Ed's mother. It was the fact that the woman who had come out of the Smith's house was living with Smith outside of wedlock. She was livid at the audacity of the whore, living in sin and brazen about it in front of a God-fearing woman. Ed later said that he believed that it was this incident that led to Augusta's second stroke. On December 27, 1945, Augusta died at the age of 67. Ed was inconsolable and distraught, wailing at his mother's funeral that was attended by few people. He believed it was the death of his one true love. Number 8. Bernice Worden was destined by God for punishment, according to Ed Gein. Bernice was rumored to have stolen her husband from another girl, who took her life as a result of him leaving her. Apparently, this was the rumor that local people whispered about Bernice Worden. It was also one of the reasons why Augusta Gein believed that the people in town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, were not worthy of her family's association. Augusta tried to raise her boys to believe that they could not have any friends or mingle with the local townspeople, because the townspeople were not good enough for the proper Ed Gein family. Ed would later claim that based on this information about Bernice, if he had done it, which he couldn't remember, her murder was ordained and justified by God. Number 9. Ed sewed together and would wear his woman's suit. Yep. In Thomas Harris's book Silence of the Lambs and the subsequent movie, with the character Buffalo Bill, gleans the moniker because he would skin his victims and create a suit that he would wear to become a female. The character was inspired by the horrible acts of Ed Gein. Ed did not only skin the women that he had dug up from their freshly buried graves, awaiting eternal sleep in their coffins, or those of his murdered victims that he dressed up like trophy deer, but he would also create a female suit from their skins. He would wear this suit while he would go dig up other graves, and when feeling, I guess, particularly moved to his feminine side, he would put on this suit and go out to his yard and dance under the full moon. I love a good midnight festival in your birthday suit, but please make sure it's your own suit. Number 10, accomplice. So this was the most shocking little tidbit I discovered. It was suspected that Ed Gein actually had help in committing some of his crimes he was suspected of. It was speculated that Ed had a friend named Gus that helped him in the grave robbings and perhaps the disappearance and murder of Mary Hogan. Police believed that the body of Mary Hogan had been carried out of her tavern when she went missing. The evidence, or lack thereof, there was no drag marks and blood, suggested that the 200-pound woman had been carried out to a waiting vehicle. Since they didn't believe Ed could have carried Mary by himself, they believed he had help. Unfortunately, this lead could not be followed up because soon after Mary's disappearance, Gus became violently insane and was admitted to a mental institution where he soon died. It appeared that he was unable to cope with what he and Ed had done, and he lost his mind. But as with other aspects of this case, investigators did not follow up on whether that was a fact. So those are the 10 things you may not have known about Ed Gein. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions down below. I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you for watching and be safe. Sending you silver streaks of wisdom.